We are very happy to welcome everyone to our lecture series, Levant Cradle of Abrahamic Religion. The lecture series provides relevant information on religion and society in Levant culture and civilization based on historical and actual scholarly perspectives to enable to the young generations to get an informed choice in studying this area. The Institute for Advanced Studies in Levant Culture and Civilization in Bucharest promoted the scientific direction and priorities in those fields, enhancing the international visibility of Romania in international research. The activity of the Institute seen as a multi-phased dialogue of humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and cultural diplomacy is developed in collaboration with leading academic fora from Europe and United States and university from across the Levantine region. Our today's lecturer is Keren Abbou Hershkovits from the Open University of Israel. Keren is a scholar in Islamic studies. She holds his PhD from Ben Gurion University of the Negev, Beersheba, Israel, with a thesis devoted to historiography of science between the 10th to the 14th centuries. She received many postdoctoral fellowships by carrying out research at Ben Gurion University, at Haifa University, McGill University, Canada, Institute of Islamic Studies. Keren will introduce us in the theme of conversion from the early stage of Islam. Her talk will be focused on an interesting topic that has not attracted much attention among the scholars, but which I hope will receive increasing attention in the future, namely women converting to Islam, agency, choices, and self-perseverance. Dear Keren, thank you for accepting our invitation. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you very much for this very kind and generous introduction. So I need to begin and say that although I've been reading this material for the past 5, maybe a bit more years, it is still a work in progress, and I'm still looking for the right way to approach the material that I have. So any comment or suggestion will be very much appreciated. So I'll share my screen and we can begin.
We are very happy to contribute with questions and comments.
That would be great. Okay, so my talk today will focus on women converting to Islam, but I think that in a way that is less predictable. The conquest of the Middle East is usually considered to be a swift move. The Sassanid Empire fell within just a few years of battle. By 636, most of the empire was conquered, and by the middle of the 7th century, when the last Sassanid Shah died, the entire empire fell to Islamic rulership. The Byzantine regions of the Middle East followed suit. By 632, Jerusalem was conquered, and in 642, Alexandria fell as well. On the other hand, the conversion process is portrayed as a much slower and far more nuanced process. In the past few decades, scholars such as Richard Bulliet, Nechemia Lepzion, and more recently, Jacques Tanous and others suggested different patterns to conversion in each region. Embedded in this diversity of models and agents of conversion is the concept that conversion was a long and complicated process, never to be taken for granted or to be inevitable. Moreover, studies have demonstrated that to convert to Islam meant different things in different times. While this complexity is maintained regarding most of the areas under Islamic rulership, this is not the case regarding the Arabian Peninsula, Jazirat al-Arab. Well, at least not until recently. My next subtitle was, what does it mean to convert to Islam in the 7th century Arabian Peninsula? And I must say that even though this is a very interesting question, I'm not actually going to answer it, but to think what can be learned by asking that question. So medieval historical narratives collate conquest and conversion, and you can guess how complicated it makes things. In other words, in stark contrast to narratives pertaining to other regions, it is assumed that once conquered, the inhabitants, mostly idol worshippers, converted en masse. Conversion was achieved by several means: persuasion, pacts and truces, as well as threats, armed battles, enslavement, and coercion. During the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad, and until his death in 632, about half of the region accepted his leadership and hence his spiritual and religious guidance. Upon the death of the Prophet, Abu Bakr, Muhammad's father-in-law and close advisor, became the first caliph. The tribes who originally signed a pact with Muhammad were expected to remain part of the Muslim community, the Muslim Ummah, accept Abu Bakr as their leader and pay the zakat, a compulsory tax. Those who opted out of the pact faced Abu Bakr's army. These battles will be defined in Islamic historiography as the Ridda Wars, the wars of apostasy. At the end of Abu Bakr's 2 years of rulership, the entire Arabian Peninsula acknowledged his rule, and his army extended its attacks to the Sassanid empires. According to the traditional Islamic narrative, the second caliph, Omar ibn al-Khattab, ordered non-Muslims to be exiled and banished out of the Arabian Peninsula, and the act of conversion to the region of Islam, to Islam was completed. Modern scholarship tends to accept this narrative, usually while emphasizing the uniqueness of this occasion. Not only was it by coercion, it was also extremely fast, and the setting was the battlefield. This was the main locale of conversion. Some may add nuances to the story, but mostly it is a story of a very linear process started by Muhammad and ended during the reign of Omar ibn al-Khattab's caliphate. In the past few years, some doubts were cast into this previously considered airtight narrative. Was the battlefield the only way? Did promises made under duress keep hold on people? Did they actually accept a new mode of life, or was it just a formality to be discarded once the Muslim soldiers left? And what does it mean? What was the definition of Jazirat al-Arab? Is there a definition? Is it a geographic region? Does it refer to the entire peninsula, something else? As in many other issues concerning the early 7th century, information is scarce and ambiguous. Heremont follows various narratives written during the 8th to the 10th centuries, relating information regarding Jazirat al-Arab, and demonstrates that there was no one clear definition of the region. Some authors define Jazirat al-Arab as the area of Mecca and Medina only, while others argue the entire Arabian Peninsula to be included. One concludes that the Jazirat al-Arab was a dynamic definition, changed and redefined with time and circumstances, shifting to accommodate conquest and rulership. Hence, Jazirat al-Arab is a construct rather than a concrete geographical region. Munt makes a direct connection between the geographic definition of the region and the process of converting to Islam, thus rendering any attempt at describing the process of conversion of the Arabian Peninsula almost impossible. Furthermore, there are are several other complications to this narrative. When attributing conversion to coercion and situating it in the battlefield, it devoids the convert from agency. It turns the conversion into something that was necessarily superimposed on the inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula, and hence closes off the possibility of any scholarly inquiry. For what would be the point in asking about a process if it seems that there was no such process to begin with? Last but not least, while males were highly invested in the battlefield, and it may be helpful to think of the battlefield as the main locale for male conversion, women had a far smaller place in this particular sphere. The category of gender may reveal values, the interplay between members of society, and allow for anonymous figures to be heard and their actions interwoven into the larger narrative. By looking into episodes depicting conversion of women, we may learn of different conversion spheres, as well as reinvest some agency to the converts, both males and females. Women appear in historical accounts, which is something that many of us tend to forget. It's almost like we don't expect them to be there, and if we actually find a woman in any narrative, her contribution is usually disregarded or much more easily disregarded. So what I'm trying to argue here is that we should, 1 minute before we chuck it away, we should just stop for a moment and think what the story tells us, or what we can ask the text to tell us about. So women appear in historical accounts, usually as mute figures. In many cases, no name is mentioned. Nonetheless, they act, move, and make change, sometimes to their own life and sometimes to the life of others. Women were required to negotiate their status, their values, and their loyalties. These negotiations serve as a stage for social values to play out and may contribute to our understanding of what was valued and what was considered reproachful. Additionally, their very liminality and obscurity make many of their action far less debatable than the action and words associated with their male counterparts. The story of female converts will help us to consider a more nuanced process of conversion and will add to the growing pool of scholarship questioning the traditional large-scale conversion story on the Hijaz and the Arabian Peninsula. Let us follow a few examples and then address this assumption. Our first aspect that I want us to look into is it's a situation where women convert without a male escort or a male wali, a protector. The battlefield is a prominent location for conversion. Women did not play a major part there. They did join some of the battles, and we know of women who attended battles as spectators, as some sort of caregivers. Some were actually fighters, and I found at least 2 women who were injured in the battlefield, but these are those in the margins. Most women were not part of the battlefield. However, the aftermath of battles do relate to women. One of the most well-known cases is the conquest of Mecca in 630 by Muhammad. Al-Waqidi, in his Kitab al-Maghazi, the Book of Campaigns, mentions 16 women who visited the Prophet Muhammad and gave allegiance without the presence of a male relative, only 6 of which are mentioned by name. Fakhida bint Abu Talib, or sometimes she's called Hanim, Muhammad's cousin and sister to Ali, converted at that day. However, her husband, Ubayra ibn Abi Wahab, fled to Najran and refused to convert. A few lines of poetry attributed to him relate his disappointment that his wife did not join him. Another woman to convert due to the conquest of Mecca was Hakim. She also converted in absence of her husband, Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, one of Muhammad's greatest opponents. However, unlike Fakhidam, she did not take her husband's leaving Mecca so lightly, and she went after him. Her moves were well planned and demonstrated her understanding of politics and rules of war and surrender. Once her conversion was secured, she addressed Muhammad and asked him to grant her husband safe conduct should he come back to Mecca, a request Muhammad complied to. After securing that, Hakim sought her husband, finding him on a boat en route to the Yemen. And we have here an exchange between Hakim and her husband. She finds him about to board the ship, but a storm occurs and the sailor is not sure what to do. And then she tells him she asks him to come back with her to Mecca, and so says the story according to Al-Waqidi. "Oh cousin, I come to you from him who reaches for the people, is most kind to the people and best of the men. Do not destroy yourself." These last words stopped Ikrimah, and he was ready to hear Hakim out, and finally consented to return to Mecca, where he met Muhammad and converted to Islam. A third woman who converted alone was Hind bint Utbah. Hind was not keen on converting. At least so argue some of the medieval historians. Hind gave allegiance after recognizing defeat. Her male relatives died in previous campaigns against the Prophet Muhammad, and she herself was even present in one of these battles, where it is argued she chewed on Hamza, Muhammad's uncle's liver. But once Mecca was conquered, she joined her fellow women and converted to Islam. These women joined Muhammad on different terms and for different reasons. This may lead us to ask further questions. In the absence of a male relative, what tools, if any, did a woman have in order to protect herself? So we can look at these three situations of conversion as actually a tool in this toolkit. They were left alone, they were left behind, they did not have much choice, so they converted to Islam in order to protect themselves. I'm not sure this is the way to interpret it, but we could look at this that way. But I think we should also look for other options, not only in interpreting these cases of conversion, but also what can a woman do in a case she's left alone and has no male protection. We could, from extensive, but by no means exhausting reading, I found two additional safety nets or tools that we can add to this toolkit available to women. They're not mentioned in many cases, but they still are mentioned. One is pacts with non-relative males, usually Muhammad, but not only. And the second is sisterhood. Let's look into them. Creating pacts did not always lead to conversion, but it was a tool for women in the aftermath of a battle to keep safe. Such was the case of Bint Hatim. Muhammad won a battle against Ali ibn Hatim. However, Ali fled with his family. Well, not all of his family. He left his sister behind. She was caught by Muhammad and was taken prisoner. She tried talking to Muhammad, asking him for help, arguing that she came from an honorable family. Muhammad did not respond the first time and not her second appeal. It seemed that Bint Hatim thought that she should just wait and see what happened. Maybe her brother will remember her and send the ransom money and things will get better. But then Ali approached her and he told her that she should try addressing Muhammad once again. This time, he stopped and listened to her and agreed to let her go. Mind you, there was no talking of conversion or any attempt to persuade her. It just seemed that she gave her speech about her father being a very honorable person, her family to be a very honorable person, and that she should not be held captive. And he just agrees. Moreover, he gives her a sum of money and tells her not to hurry, that she should look for the best way and the safest way to find her brother. And by the time she finds an escort, she says her goodbye and goes to find her brother. And she finds him. After an exchange of a few harsh words for his leaving her behind, she added a word of advice. You should join Muhammad because he is a man of honor. And the episode ends by Adi returning with his family and his tribe, and they all convert to Islam. Kulthum set a pact with Muhammad in a very different situation. This time it is not exactly an aftermath of a battle, but the aftermath. Just before the conquest of Mecca, 2 years prior to the conquest of Mecca, there was a pact signed between Muhammad and the people of Mecca. It is called the Pact of Hudaibiyah, which sets a truce between Muhammad, the Muslim army, and the Meccan army. One of the articles of this truce was that should a person leave Mecca and try to join Muhammad in Medina, this person should be returned to Mecca. The story of Kulthum appears in several sources. We should look today in Waqidi's version. We'll try to stick to just a very few sources. Kulthum bint Uqba left Mecca and immigrated to Medina after the Pact of Hudaibiyah. She was very much aware to the articles of this pact, and she was very much worried about these articles. Upon her arrival to Medina, she went to Salama, one of Muhammad's wives. She went to her residence and removed her veil and recited her genealogy. However, Salama was not very impressed by this lineage and was far more interested in her affiliation. And she demanded, "Did you immigrate to Allah and his messenger?" Kulthum answered that she did. But she also mentioned that she was worried Muhammad will make her go back as he did with men. When Muhammad came to visit Salama, she informed him of the presence of Kulthum. Muhammad greeted Kulthum and she told him of her worries. "O Messenger of Allah, I have fled with my religion to you, so keep me and do not return me to them. They will prevent me and hurt me, and I have no patience with pain. I am a woman and women are weak. As you know, I have seen you return 2 men to the polytheists until one of them refused, but I am a woman." In this anecdote, Kulthum is addressing Muhammad with a request that outs to the fore everything men attribute women. They are weak, they are not able to stand pain, and they're not able to stand for principles in the face of harm. They need protection. Embedded in this request is the expectation that men should protect women. But there is also something else. Kulthum does not address Muhammad on her own. She asks for help. This brings us to the second tool in women's toolkit for protection in the absence of a male relative: sisterhood. Let's look into one case of sisterhood that directly pertains to conversion. There are other cases, but they're not exactly related to conversion, so we'll leave them for now. Zainab, Muhammad's daughter, remained in Mecca after Muhammad's hijrah to Medina. After a while, she wished to join her father and the community of Muslims. It is not clear when exactly this took place. We only know that it had to be after the Battle of Badr in 624, since during that battle, she sent a message to her father in Medina, and she would probably didn't have done that should she have been in the same city as he was. Just at the eve of her departure, the following conversation is recorded. While I was getting ready to travel to Mecca in order to join my father, Hind bint Utbah, remember her? She was the one who converted a few years later, met me and said, "Daughter of Muhammad, I have not heard that you wish to join your father." I said, "I do not want to do so." She said, "Cousin, do not deny it. If you need anything which will make your journey more comfortable or any money to help you reach your father, I have whatever you need. So do not be ashamed to ask, for men's quarrels have nothing to do with women." And by God, I was sure she meant what she said, but I was afraid of her and I denied that I wanted to go. Nevertheless, I got ready to travel. So this one is a very strict and clear case of sisterhood, though it is not reciprocated. Zainab is not ready to take Hind on her offer. But it does tell us that at least some of the women thought that helping another woman is important just for her being a woman. I remind you that by this time, Zainab is the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. She has converted to Islam, and Hind is in the very, very adamant opposition to Muhammad, and yet she offers this help. Until now, we mentioned women converting as a result of battles or in the aftermath of battles. In some cases, women also acted as agents of conversion. Since the battlefield is less plausible as a location for women to proselytize, I suggest we come up with other possible arenas. Women are usually associated with the private sphere, so let's go with the obvious and start there. An interesting case of conversion is the conversion, at least one of the narratives of the conversion of Omar ibn al-Khattab. I mentioned him earlier to be one of Muhammad's companions and close friends, and the second caliph. He came to rule after the death of Abu Bakr, the first caliph. The person that is associated with the conversion of Omar is his sister Fatima. According to several sources, Omar heard a rumor that his sister Fatima and her husband Said have converted to Islam. Being one of Muhammad's fierce opponents, he went to check things for himself. He entered the house of his sister and saw her reading a piece of paper. Habab, the person who taught Fatima and her husband the text, that were actually reading a verse of the Quran, hid away. since Omar was known to be a very fierce person and having a very, very strong fist that he did not hesitate to use. The sister and her husband were asked what they were doing with harsh words, and the words were quickly replaced with physical violence. He hit his brother-in-law severely. Fatima came to his rescue and called upon Omar, "Ya Omar, what if the truth is not in your religion? Testify that there is no God but Allah. Testify that Muhammad is God's messenger." All of a sudden, Omar became aware that he had hit his sister. Wishing to make her feel better, he asked her for the piece of paper so he can read and see what was actually written there. She refused, and she asked him to go and purify himself, to clean himself. After he performs ablution, we don't know what this ablution requires. She surrenders the piece of paper to him, and he reads a verse of Muhammad's revelation. The sources give different verses. Some say it is part of chapter 20, others say it is part of chapter 69. Well, we don't know. Omar becomes engrossed with the divine word and immediately asks to meet Muhammad. Later on, he meets him and eventually converts to Islam and becomes a prominent protector and spokesperson of Islam. A second interesting case of conversion within the private sphere is the conversion of Sulaim's of two people. Sulaim was, she had a son. And according to Ibn Sa'd, the author of Kitab al-Tabaqat al-Kabir, the following anecdote is related. Sulaim believed in the messenger of Allah, and Abu Anas, her husband, came and heard what she was saying. And he tells her, "Have you become a heretic?" She said, "I have not become a heretic. I have believed in this man. I have begun to teach Anas, her son, their son. I told to him to say there is no God but Allah, and to say I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. He did that." His father said to her, "Do not corrupt my son for me." She said, "I'm not corrupting him." This situation might have been a bit dangerous for her or problematic. However, Abu Anas died soon after this conversation took place, and she never had to suffer any harm on this on behalf of teaching her son the ways of Islam. After a while, a man named Abu Talha wished to marry her, but she refused. One day, she said to him, "Do you think that a stone should be worshipped when it can neither harm nor benefit you? Or what about a piece of wood which you take to a carpenter who carved it for you? Does it help to or harm you?" What she said had a profound effect on him, and he went to her and said, "What you said has had a profound effect on me." He believed, she said, "I will marry you, and you will not take any dower, and I will not take any dower from you, from your accept that." So she basically accepts his conversion as a dower. Both women persuade their listeners by presenting their belief as the only possible truth, and they use it by means of logic. We have other ways of women acting as agents of conversion, but I think these two cases are very interesting since they use logical persuasion, means of persuasion, rather than experiencing some kind of a miracle or using family loyalty as a mean of conversion. There are Oh, sorry. I think that these situations also put them in a position of acknowledging a larger truth or a larger understanding of what they're doing. I'm not saying that these situations actually took place or there was a complete understanding of what was to be, what it means to be a Muslim. What I'm saying is that the narrative authors argued and put these words into the mouths of women. And this is something that we need to take under consideration. They're not mere followers, but believers who are willing to act according to this belief, which is a bit contradictory to what Kulthum had actually said on this matter. The aim of this talk was not to present with a new model for the conversion of the Arabian Peninsula, but to consider what conversion stories tell us and look for sections in the current concepts of this process that are currently neglected. Assuming these stories may not represent actual events, but more likely what would be perceived as plausible by contemporaries of the author. And I intentionally concentrated on authors from the 9th century in this presentation. Turning to women's stories is also a safer approach than looking into conversion of males, since males were usually part of networks and leadership elites. Their story is embedded in a large frame of commitments and power. Women's stories are usually mentioned in passing. In many cases, they're not even mentioned by name. Their roles are supportive rather than the main story. Like in the case of Hakim, we heard at the beginning, it is not exactly the conversion of Hakim that is interesting. The interesting for the author is the conversion of her husband, of Ikrimah, since he was a great opponent and he tried to go away, and nonetheless, he returned and acknowledged the importance of Islam and the truthfulness of Islam and so on, and eventually converted and accepted Islam. So women they are helpers. They're usually not the focus of the story. Therefore, it is less likely authors took the trouble to embellish the roles or the character of women. These are parts of the narrative that are less likely to be exaggerated, and they're usually also parts that will far more easily be accused of being untruthful. Readers will identify very easily if the narrative does not conform to what they perceive as women's place in society, women's role in society, or norms, acceptable norms of society. And if something like that happens, the entire narratives will fall apart. So it is not very likely that for the sake of saying something good about a woman, the author will take the trouble in doing all this process. Hence, addressing women's conversion stories may provide a detour into uncovering the values and norms of early Muslim communities. Along the way, we also challenge the prevailing assumption that women had no agency whatsoever. Women may have had only little agency, but they had some, and conversion was among the tools available to them to create alliances and change their life circumstances. We may not be in the position to write a new narrative of the conversion of the Arabian Peninsula, but any attempt at doing so needs to take women's stories into account. Should we neglect that, the battlefield will continue to be to highlight the narrative and probably also distort it. Last but not least, such an approach will also redeem lost voices, not only of women, but also the rest of the converts, those who were not among the elite or those who were not among the first to convert. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this impressive, very comprehensive presentation, which we listened to with much interest. I'm sure that some questions and remarks will be addressed in the next minutes. First of all, I would like to ask if we can find in the sources some changes in terms of women's role in the society from the Umayyad to the Abbasid periods. Because one of your conclusions was, and I think this is very right, that women conversion was a tool to negotiate their role in the society and their place within the center of the society. If you can deepen a little bit this idea.
Okay. Our sources are from Abbasid period. So I'm not sure I'm comfortable to say anything about a change, since on the one hand, I would be very happy to say, well, the stories talk about the early Islamic period, and they may reveal things about let's say last 2/3 of the 7th century, but I'm not sure we can do that. What we could do is accept, as Hugh Kennedy argues, that there was probably not some large scale of creating this big false narrative just so it fits whatever we need. And also we have different versions. So I don't think it is a fixed narrative, but to say which narrative refers to something that actually happened and which narrative is a reflection, that will be more complicated, I think. I think we can safely say that these stories confirm to what people during the 8th and 9th century believed to be appropriate, relevant. Some of it probably refers to stories that was transmitted partly orally, partly written, but I cannot say much about a change exactly between the Umayyad and the Abbasid period. So sorry to disappoint on that aspect.
That's very nice approach. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have some questions in the chat.
Yeah, long questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me read the first one. Was material gain a legitimate reason to convert to Islam in the 7th century, and only in the later centuries it became frowned upon?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, most of the conversion stories we find in early texts like Waqidi and Ibn Sa'd usually do not refer to personal gain, though there probably were quite a few of it, unless if you refer, when you say personal gain, you refer to being loyal to your family, which comes up a lot. I think that the main shift is that while in the early period, it is not very clear what it means to be a Muslim, and the shift between being a non-Muslim into being a Muslim was not so clear-cut and was not related only to, or even at all, to what you believe, but more to values that prevailed in the community. And one of the main values was family loyalties. We have numerous cases of people addressing their families and saying, you should join join Muhammad because I'm your brother, I'm your uncle, I'm your mother, I'm your son, and we need to stick together and we need to protect one another. It doesn't always work, but in some cases it does work. Additionally, at least according to the major narratives, at least in the first years, once a person converts, he puts his or her life in danger. So there isn't much gain there. As time goes on, it is more available, and there is a lot to gain. So people do convert, and then we also find these stories of either conversion not being acceptable, or being suspicious, or not acknowledged even, but it happens only later. Should I read the second?
Yes, and the second.
Yeah.
You mentioned viewing the battlefield as the principal avenue for male conversion. Could you elaborate on this point? Is there a link between battlefield prowess and spiritual enlightenment?
Great question, thank you. I'll need to copy all these questions, so I added to my my talk, to my thinking of this subject. Well, I'm not even sure that I can say that the battlefield is the main place where people converted. We could probably say that the consequences of battles was a major incentive to convert, sometimes because people had no choice, and sometimes because it was just easier. You could either run away or stay, and if you stay and Muhammad conquered the area, it will be much easier to be a Muslim. However, what Munt says, and I agree with him fully, that this conversion should not, we need to consider what it means to convert under such situations. I believe that we could safely say that people who converted under such situations usually meant two things. One, that they recited the Shahada, and second is that they paid the zakat, the tax. So other than that, it doesn't mean that they actually understood what it means, that they were taught what it means, that they were familiar with revelations or anything of the sort. They did what was expected from them. And as for Prowess in the battlefield, the Islamic narrative definitely refers to heroism and success as being a demonstration of divine guidance, and as a proof for Islam's truthfulness. So there are instances where we see that the success is something that is mentioned to convince others as a very valid reason why they should convert. And as for spiritual enlightenment there are, but there is one case that is very interesting. A person that he goes on a trip, and everybody tells him that he should not listen to Muhammad because he separates between brothers and between fathers and their sons, and listening to him will be very dangerous. So this person goes to hear Muhammad, but he puts cotton pieces in his ears so he won't hear what Muhammad says. Cotton does not stand in the way of God's words, and Muhammad's words reach him, and he feels that he sees the light, and he goes to Muhammad, and he's very excited, and he tells him that he accepts him as God's messenger, and he wants to go and persuade his tribe to become Muslim because his words bear the truth, the absolute truth. And he also asks Muhammad to give him a sign that he can show his fellow tribesmen and convince them to become Muslim. So it's very interesting that on the one hand, he is convinced just by the words, by the beauty of Muhammad's words, by Muhammad as a leader, but when he goes to his tribe, he needs some kind of a sign, some kind of a miracle that will prove the validity of the words he bears to them. And he makes a light shine from his forehead, and this person goes back to his tribe, and he tells everybody Muhammad's words, but nobody is convinced. Do you want to guess who are the only two people who are convinced? Only his wife and his father, and they're not convinced, not by his words, but not by this light that comes from his forehead, but by his refusal to be part of the family. He tells them that now he belongs to a different community and he follows a different religion, and therefore he cannot associate with them. So both his father and his wife tell them, so tell us what is this new religion, and we'll join the religion, and you will be part of our family once again. So this is an interesting case that he's spiritually enlightened, but his family join him for completely different reasons.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. We go to the third question from Mihai Marian. Thank you for this extremely interesting presentation, as well as for the fascinating foray into the Islamic world. In addition to the above, I would be interested to know if there is even a date on which some correlations could be established between the demographic situation of the region in the referred period, respectively the demographic ratio between female and male population, and the phenomenon of conversion to Islam of women. In other words, are there more women than men in those societies? And from here arose a problem of social and community integration of women, which found its solution in their conversion to Islam and the acquisition of the social role projected by the Muslim religion for women.
I'm sorry,
maybe there are not too many dates in the sources about such a demographic situations in the early community of Islam.
There are no demographic, there's no demographic data. Also, if we, it's a very interesting comment. Thank you for that. I'll have to think about it. My first response will be that there probably wasn't a significant issue of demographic difference. I believe that there wasn't an abundance of women or something like that. And also, women's conversion stories are but a fraction of the male conversion stories. Ibn Sa'd's book, he wrote the book of the first converts to Islam. He has several volumes referring to males, to male converts, and only one single, quite short volume about women converting. And most of the information we receive is just a few lines. Some of the women are mentioned several times, and so you can't even make a list of all the stories and say, okay, this is how much women converted. It also, I think, highlights that once such a woman is mentioned, we need to take it under consideration, because for every woman that is mentioned, there were probably hundreds of others who are not mentioned. So the sources will tell us that there are more males than females, but I don't think that would be the case. It is just the norm of not talking about women, or if one does mention a woman, then it is usually with very, very little details, but they are there. They are definitely there. In many cases, they're not mentioned by name. We need to look for them.
Okay, and we have a reply from Alexander to your response. Thank you for your answer. I was referring especially to the arguments of the sister of Ali ibn Hatim when she was trying to convince him to go to Muhammad. You mentioned the sister of Umar, that she had a role to play in his conversion. Are there other such stories of women being the converter or facilitating the conversion of great Muslims?
Yes, there are. I just, I don't remember the first question. Oh, the first question was
it was
the personal gain.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this is what I was referring to as to what exactly one means when one says personal gain. There are many stories on this general terms of people who join because they see, they consider it to be an appropriate idea. It is better to convert, better to join Muhammad and not join him. In later years, personal gain is usually translates into actual money or a post in court or things like that, and that is something that has various repercussions to it. As for women converting, acting as agents of conversion, yes, we have several such women, and Fatma was just one of them. Another was a woman who also wanted to leave Mecca and was on her way to Medina, and she was looking for an escort. And there was a person, according to some of the narratives, he was a Jew, and he told her that he will take her personally and safely to Medina, and she agrees to allow him to do so. And once they are on the way, he takes away her food and drink, and it's portrayed as a means to cause her to reject Islam, but she refuses to do so. And once night comes, she is by miracle given sweet liquid, and once he sees that she's drenched, she's completely wet, he asks her what happened, and she explains that that her beliefs helped her through this rough time, and he converts to Islam, and she goes on to the fields and calls the people in the field to convert to Islam. And there are other women who facilitate conversion. I mentioned Hamza, one of Muhammad's uncles. So Hamza was on one of his hunting trips, and once he returns, a woman whose name we don't know calls him and tells him that one of Muhammad's opponents was very offensive against him. So Hamza goes to him and he takes his bow. He just came from his hunting trip, so he had his bow in his head, and he hits him and cracks his skull, and he tells him not to touch his nephew, and that he himself has already converted. So and there are various other stories where women either persuade males or females to convert, or they act as facilitators on the way of a person's conversion, or at least accepting the willingness to become Muslim.
I wonder if you can outline some phases of conversion, or some phases within the conversion process. And here I would like to hear a little bit about conditions that were required to get converted. Can we speak here of a consent to rules of faith in early Islamic society? This would be one.
That's a great question, and I cannot say that there is one single pattern. Mm-hmm. There are two cases I found of the agent of conversion asking the convertee to purify himself or herself, but just two such cases. It doesn't mean that there aren't others, but these are the ones that I found, and I read quite a lot of conversion stories. There are cases where people are interrogated about the truthfulness of their conversion. One such case of such interrogation is also a case of a woman who facilitates conversion. This is one of Muhammad's relatives. She it's in Medina. Are you familiar with the Banu Qurayza? Banu Qurayza were a Jewish tribe in Medina, and in some phase the relation between Muhammad and the Banu Qurayza were deteriorated, and there are several narratives, but mainly the males were executed, and children and women were supposed to be sold to slavery, or sent away from Medina. And upon the day of this occasion, one of the men of the Banu Qurayza goes to Muhammad's female relative and asks her for protection, which she gives him. And then she goes to Muhammad and tells him, I have given him protection, and he accepts Islam. And Muhammad does not accept it, and he wants to say something much more profound than just saying that he accepts Islam. And she goes back home, and after a while she comes back and tells him he ate the meat of a camel, and he prays with me 5 times a day. And only after that does he agree to meet with him and accept his oath of alliance. Most of the other conversion stories are not so detailed. Most of them refer just to giving the oath of alliance, giving the bay'ah, and nothing more. But there are other cases where we do find either this interrogation or some kind of acknowledgement of not only reciting the Shahada, the belief in Allah and Muhammad as his messenger, but also reciting some of the demands that Islam requires. But there are not that many in this period. Later on, narratives of conversion in later period, they do refer to an actual process.
Okay, thank you. Another point I would be interested in is regarding a potential crisis in the conversion process after the death of Muhammad. I suppose that probably many converted have been disappointed about his death, and because they had actually other expectations. Could we hypothesize such a crisis or such a potential crisis in the conversion process during that time?
I think that this exactly refers to the previous question. The very crisis or the Rida wars demonstrate that it was not very clear what it means to be a Muslim. It was not referred or understood as this new concept of religion, very different from any other religion the tribes may have practiced. And it required this period of war in order to make people accept the rulership of Abu Bakr. And this also refers to that the conversion was a process. It was not, even after people agreed to pay the zakat and recited the shahada, their idea of what it means to be a Muslim was not clear and probably not uniform. That means that people in different places of the Arabian Peninsula might have had different concepts of what it meant to be a Muslim. And it took a while for the community to actually create this understanding of what it means to be a Muslim. And it wasn't something that took place just once and for all. It was a very long process. And also during the time of Muhammad, it was not very clear when a person was a Muslim and when he was not. And there are cases, there is at least one case where Muhammad stays in a house of a woman, and he tells her, why wouldn't you join my new religion? And she says, well, I can't join your new religion because I'm a single woman. She was a widower, I think, and I cannot afford to put myself in danger. So he tells her, you don't have to say anything to anybody. Just when you pray, don't pray facing the idols, but pray with your back to the idols, and hence your prayers will be addressed to Allah and not to the idols. So this woman continued to pretend to be an idol worshiper until the day of her death. And upon her death, her son, who did convert, comes to Muhammad and he tells him that his mother has died. And Muhammad orders him to bury her in the Islamic grave section, and he informs him of his visit and her conversion. So it's probably a very long process, and I'm not sure we will ever be able to identify each part or each phase of this process. And I'm not sure that it's a question that we should ask, because I think it always puts us in the same situation of saying, okay, we cannot really say it because we don't know what it means to be a Muslim. It's a process, how people become Muslims. We don't know which regions exactly it refers to, because the region changes once the majority of a particular area become Muslims, and so on and so on. So I think that what we should do with these stories of conversion is to try to see what we could learn about this society. And I think that all the questions that came up today also demonstrate that we should ask for these social processes and social roles, and that will probably be more helpful for us. And who knows, maybe one day we'll have a time machine and we can go back and see.
Yeah, maybe we wish this. As far as I know, in the Syriac Christian sources, on the Muslim conquest of the Arabian Gulf, we know about some reports regarding conversion within the Christian society to Islam to avoid paying taxes. And then during the Rida Wars, during the Wars of apostasy, they came back to the Christianity. We are told about this phenomenon by the letters of Ishaq III, the first East Syriac Patriarch during Islam. This also was a very interesting case in the south of Iraq. If you have some comments more, if not, we have one more question. Following on Alexander's question, what, if any, other notable representations of non-confessional female agency within the patriarchal Islamic society can we find elsewhere in the early Islamic imaginary?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Could you please elaborate, Maxime?
I suppose it's more about the female profile in the Islamic literature, or maybe some perceptions of the biblical female profile than included also or adopted within the Islamic literature and the Quran itself. Do we have some kind of pictures of female profile in the patriarchal, if we can say so, in the patriarchal Islamic society?
I see that he's elaborating here. Female agency elsewhere within the community, but not in relation to conversion. Is this the question? If so, then definitely yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great question. Thank you. You're giving me opportunity to talk about all these interesting women. Yes. There are, and they actually add to this toolkit that I'm trying to suggest here. One interesting case is one of Abu Bakr's daughters. She was married to a man that was mean, simply mean. Everybody knew it. Everybody were aware that he's very violent and he's very jealous and that he's not a very nice person. And she goes to her father and she tells him that she's not happy. And he tells her, well, dear daughter, this is your husband, this is your life. That's it. You're there for life. And you would expect that she would just do that because this is what her father tells her, and it seems that she has no choice, but she does have a choice, and she shows that she will not accept such a situation. One day she goes to one of her grievances is that her husband would not allow her any help. He wouldn't hire a maid or purchase a slave girl. And she has to do all the hard work. She's on her way back from the field carrying this big sack of something. And while she's walking with her heavy load, she meets Muhammad, who is riding on his camel, and he stops and calls her and tells her to come and ride on his camel, and she does not answer him. She looks at him, she listens to him, but she does not talk to him and does not go on his camel. And everybody, within seconds, everybody talks about it, and she goes back home and her husband is there and he is furious for her behavior, and he tells her, what did you do? And she tells him, well, I knew that you would be very jealous if I had spoken to Muhammad, so I did not talk to him. I was a loyal woman, and I returned home to prepare your food. Well, I'm adding a little bit, but this is the main spirit of the thing. And the day afterwards, he buys her a slave girl, and he stops hitting her. So, and there are several other such cases of women moving within the confines. It's not that this woman was trying to say, I want to create a new order. No, she understands that her place is very low in the pyramid of power, but within this very small and not comfortable place, she knows how to negotiate things and find ways that allow her to make a change to her life. Another extremely interesting case is of a woman that's a later story after the death of Muhammad. Omar is preparing to go to sleep, and he hears a baby crying. And he asks, who is the baby? Who is the mother of the baby? He calls the mother and he is very angry with her, and he tells her to make him shut up and goes to try and sleep again. But a few minutes later, he is woken again because the baby keeps on crying. And in the morning, he calls the woman again and he tells her that she's a terrible mother, because if she was a good mother, her child wouldn't have cried the entire night. And she tells him, well, Omar, you do not provide for babies because you do not give allowances for Muslim babies, only to children from a certain age. And then Omar is left without words, because he understands that if he does not give allowance, the mother does not eat enough, she does not have enough milk, she cannot feed her baby, and the baby cries the entire night and does not allow him to sleep. So he changes the diwan, he changes the distribution of allowances, and says that every born Muslim will get a certain allowance. We do not hear the name, we're not given the name of this woman, we do not know who her father was, we do not know if she was alone, if she was married, divorced, widow, we don't know nothing about her, but she brought a major shift in the life of the entire community. And I find it hard to believe that she did it without thinking. I believe that there was at least some planning done there. And I'll stop here, but there are many other such cases.
Well, thank you so much. I just would like to make a very short parallel to the Christian society, actually, because we know in the Christian reports that women as mothers are very present in the hagiographical reports. For example, in texts about the Cappadocian fathers, we know about the roles of the motherhood in educating the children who embraced then later the holy life. But anyway, the percentage male, female in hagiographic literature tips the balance more in favor of male characters. Mm-hmm. And I suppose this is a tendency of the literature and of course of the church administration as such, but does not reflect the reality within the Christian community.
Yeah.
And sorry for our exhausting questions, but the interest was great for the perspective you presented. And I think there are no other questions. A big thank you from all the participants. And I think now we are at the end of our lecture. Thank you once again for the privilege of having you as speaker. We learned very interesting things today from your perspective, and we hope that we have other opportunities to work together with the Institute and also with your academic projects.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure, and your questions were just wonderful. Thank you very much for that.
Once we have the lectures capture, I will send you. And of course, all the questions, maybe you can include in your future perspectives in dealing with this very interesting period of the early Islam. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.